Hello everyone and welcome back to Abyssin. Today we're diving into two stories that reveal just how unforgiving the depths of the earth can be. In Tennessee, what starts as a simple walk quickly turns into a claustrophobic nightmare. Meanwhile, in Indiana, an adventure among friends becomes a desperate fight against cold and time. Two men, two caves, and the same looming fate, being trapped beneath tons of rock. What unfolded underground wasn't just a terrifying ordeal, it became one of the worst experiences a modern cave explorer could ever face. If you enjoy this kind of content, don't forget to give it a like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps me out a lot. It was a freezing day, December 21st, 1981, when 34-year-old Jeff Hogue from Luttrell, Tennessee, decided to head out on foot. The plan was simple: borrow a friend's pickup truck and drive to North Carolina, about 120 miles away. But when the truck wouldn't start, a frustrated Jeff opted to go for a walk, probably to clear his head. What he didn't expect was the biting cold and the treacherous terrain that awaited him. He chose a path that led through a remote part of Knox County, known for a large natural sinkhole that connects to an underground cave system. The freezing rain had turned the ground into a slick, dangerous trap. Determined, Jeff kept walking for about a mile from his friend's house, but luck was about to run out. As he crossed a dense, wooded area, Jeff lost his footing on the muddy ground. He tried to catch himself but had no chance. He slipped and slid uncontrollably before plunging straight into a hole hidden beneath the vegetation. It was a sinkhole, a deep crevice he hadn't seen until it was too late. He fell nearly 20 feet into the darkness of a narrow shaft with slick, wet walls. At the bottom of the pit, disoriented and gasping for air, Jeff tried to grasp the severity of the situation. Miraculously, he hadn't broken any bones, but he was now trapped in a tight space surrounded by tall, muddy walls. Each attempt to climb out only made things worse. His fingers sank into the soft earth and he slid right back down. The more he struggled, the deeper he seemed to sink. With the cold intensifying and no food or shelter, panic began to set in. At night, the temperature plummeted and his body shook uncontrollably. He hugged himself and rubbed his hands together, trying to generate warmth, but the cold pierced through his clothes and settled deep in his bones. He shouted for help, but his voice barely made it through the thick earth above. The silence was suffocating. The next day brought no relief. The sun warmed things up slightly, making Jeff sweat, but there was no way to replace what he was losing. He started collecting tiny droplets of water that trickled down the muddy walls using his cupped hands. In a desperate attempt, he tried to fashion a rope. He tore pieces of his clothing, even his underwear, braided them together and tied them to branches he found nearby. But the soft ground couldn't hold his weight, and he kept falling back down. As the days passed, the cold became unbearable. Jeff shivered violently. He started hallucinating, seeing shadows and hearing voices. He imagined people looking down at him from the surface, but when he focused, there was no one there. His hands and face were raw from the constant mud, and his feet were swollen from being soaked in cold, wet soil. He was too weak to even call out. By the 6th day, he was giving up. Out of strength, out of ideas, and with his body deteriorating, time felt like it was slipping away. He knew he was losing weight fast and couldn't last much longer, but just when everything seemed lost, something changed. 8 days after his fall, 3 local teenagers, Mike, Daryl, and Cody, were out in the woods hunting squirrels. While walking along a barely used trail, they noticed something strange, a large hole in the ground. Curious, they moved closer and stood in silence, listening. For a few seconds, nothing. Then a faint cough echoed from below, a rough, barely audible sound. They shouted, asking if anyone was down there. Jeff thought he was hallucinating again, but when he heard their voices a second time, he knew it was real. Using every bit of strength he had left, he yelled as loud as he could. Slowly, through his blurred vision, he saw faces looking down from above. The boys realized someone was trapped and ran off to get help. Before long, rescue teams arrived with ropes and equipment. A rescuer was carefully lowered into the hole where Jeff was barely conscious. His face was pale, his lips cracked, and his body cold and frail. Gently, they secured him into a harness and began lifting him out. Every inch of the ascent felt like a race against time, but they made it. Jeff was finally pulled from the hole that nearly became his grave. He had spent 8 days in total isolation, lost over 25 pounds, and was severely dehydrated and hypothermic. His body temperature had dropped to around 84 degrees Fahrenheit. He was rushed to the hospital where he was treated for hypothermia, dehydration, and a serious foot infection caused by prolonged exposure to moisture. Despite the physical toll, Jeff survived to tell his story. On May 17, 2003, Gerard Watt and 2 of his friends, all experienced cavers, arrived early at Buckner's Cave in Indiana. They were excited and ready to take on the winding tunnels and narrow passages of the rocky terrain. The thrill came not only from the potential of uncovering new paths, but also from the strong bond they shared, built on previous adventures underground. The entrance to the cave was familiar, even comforting, and everything seemed to be going as planned. But none of them could have predicted that, in less than 24 hours, this trip would become a grueling battle against the raw forces of nature and their own limits. As they ventured deeper into the cave, the tunnels grew tighter and the air heavier. Still, the trio pressed on until they reached one of the most challenging areas, a tight squeeze above a stream known by locals as Purgatory. The path was steep and tricky, requiring careful movement. One by one, they began making their way through. Jarod went first. Taking a deep breath, he wedged himself into the vertical opening, using his feet for support and his arms to pull himself up, while the beam from his headlamp lit the narrow path ahead. His shoulders and hips constantly scraped against the rock. He was used to tight spaces, but this felt different. The tunnel narrowed in subtle ways he hadn't expected. Then suddenly he stopped moving. His body was wedged tightly between the rock walls, his torso twisted in an awkward position, making it impossible to go forward or back. He tried shifting his arms and legs, forcing his body against the stone, but only ended up stuck deeper. He was completely immobilized. One friend tried to pull him back, but every attempt made the space feel even tighter. Realizing they couldn't free him on their own, they made a quick decision. One friend stayed with Jarod to provide support, while the other crawled back out of the cave to get help. Time dragged on painfully slow. Jarod was trembling, struggling to breathe in the confined space. The damp air seeped into his bones, and hypothermia started to take hold. Every ache, every fear was intensified by the complete silence of the cave. Hours later, hope returned in the form of voices echoing from the cave's entrance. The rescue team had arrived, bringing their tools and expertise. They carefully assessed the situation. The passage was incredibly tight, compressing Jarod's chest and limbs, restricting blood flow and movement. As the night wore on, rescuers began drilling and chiseling the rock with extreme precision to free him. Each strike echoed through the tunnel. Jarod focused on his breathing, trying to stay calm. The cold was brutal, and his fingers and toes were going numb. But he held on while the team worked with determination. As morning approached, their efforts intensified. Finally, a slab of rock wedged against his side broke loose. That gave him just enough room to shift slightly. Encouraged by the rescuers, he moved slowly and eventually slipped free, tumbling into the stream below, exhausted but relieved. Despite muscle aches and extreme fatigue, Jarod was finally free. The rescuers wrapped him in lithodermal blankets, gave him water and energy bars to help him recover. His hands trembled as he held the bottle. The weight of what he had endured began to hit him. He was sore and worn out, but alive and without serious injuries. If you enjoyed this story, click the video on your screen now to watch another cave exploration that went horribly wrong. Don't forget to like and subscribe, it really helps me out. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.